Hey you guys, I'm Kim. Welcome to my craft room. Today I'm going to show you how to make these adorable little snowmen. They are super easy. They're made out of paper clay and styrofoam and will just take you a few hours to make. Let me turn around and I will show you exactly how it's done. Okay, let's start with supplies. You're going to need some styrofoam balls. You can use an open cell ball like this one. It measures about 2.5 inches in diameter. You can also use a closed cell type styrofoam. I'm going to be using both in this project because it's what I have on hand. The smaller one is just a little less than 2 inches wide. I like to put some wax paper down on my surface when working with clay. Also have some toothpicks and some cotton swabs handy. You'll want some water to dip your fingers in from time to time and then a paper towel to dry them off with. If you have some leftover styrofoam packaging, that is very helpful too. We'll use it to kind of set our pieces on to dry later. This is my go-to brand of paper clay. I get it at Hobby Lobby because it will cycle on 40% off regularly. When it's open, I keep it in a Ziploc bag, and that's what I work out of. Keeps it nice and moist. The first thing I need to do is cut a little end off of the styrofoam balls so they don't roll away on me. It's easy to do with the open cell foam. I just use a bread knife because that's what I have handy, and it will easily slice off a little piece. You don't have to take much off, just a little bit so that you have a firm base for the ball to kind of sit on. The closed cell foam is a little more difficult to cut. I use a box cutter and kind of pull out the blade fairly long. Think about carving a little piece off rather than slicing, and it'll be fine. I'm going to clean up the work area a little bit and get the paper clay out. I'm going to start by grabbing like maybe a walnut size piece of clay and kind of warming it up in my hands, getting it soft, and then I'm going to press it into a big flat piece, kind of like you're trying to roll out pie dough just using your hands. You can roll this out. This is just what's easiest for me to do, especially on a smaller type project like this. So just start from the middle, push the clay out to the edges. When I think I have a fairly uniform, flat little piece of clay, I'm going to take my styrofoam ball and dip it in the water. That helps the clay stay onto it. I'm going to start from the top of the head, from the opposite side of that piece I cut off. And I'm just going to lay the clay over the piece and press it down. And at this point, I'm just trying to get a very thin layer of clay over my styrofoam shape. I work from kind of the top of the head to the bottom of the shape. At some point, you end up with that flap of clay. Just pinch it off, and then I reposition the flap over the open bit of styrofoam and work the edges of the clay pieces together. Once the ball is fully covered, my goal is just to smooth out the clay as much as possible. Sometimes I notice that I have an air bubble trapped in the clay. I just use a toothpick to puncture the clay, remove that air, and then just keep smoothing. It's also helpful to get your fingers wet and use the water to help you smooth out the clay. That's fine. If you have extra clay, you can also remove the excess clay and keep smoothing it out. The clay is very forgiving. Just have fun with it. Know that you have quite a long time before the clay starts to dry out, so you can spend as much time as you want working over the clay. The next thing I do is add a few facial details. Here I'm making a little cone shape for the nose. I don't want it to be too long so that it might break during storage. So this is a good shape for me. To help it attach to the head, I get the end of the clay piece wet and have the clay that it's attaching to wet. Then I take a Q-tip that has a little water on it and use that to help me blend those two pieces of clay together. I'm also going to put a couple of cheeks on each of my snowmen, and to help me try to get 2 pieces of clay roughly the same size. I usually roll out a little snake of clay and then use a toothpick to cut the clay. Now I think I have like roughly the same size of clay for each of the cheek. I'm just gonna roll it into a little ball, squish it out, and then attach it again wet on wet to the snowman head. Well, that's all I'm going to add to this little guy. So next I will stick a toothpick in the base of the head, that flat part, get out the scrap styrofoam that I have and use it as a nice little drying rack. That way I've got good air circulation to every side of the snowman head. I decided to have some fun with the second snowman. I gave him a little button nose, and at this point I was thinking that I wanted to dress up my snowmen as if they were going to a New Year's party, and one of them I wanted to have them blow a little party noisemaker so that I had a place to stick the noisemaker into the snowman. I needed to make like a little hole, so I took a length of cotton swab and then I drilled like a pilot hole with the toothpick and stuck this cotton swab into the hole that I made just as a placekeeper for an insertion point for the noisemaker later in the process. I ended up making 3 of the larger size snowman heads, but I still had that one little closed cell styrofoam ball, and I decided that would be the perfect baby snowman to go to the party. I wanted this guy to be getting sleepy, so I made it big, heavy, sleepy eyelids, but I didn't like the way they looked. So I wanted to show you how easy it is to take off a part. I just removed the eyelids, got some water, and smoothed over the place where the eyelids were, and you can never tell that they were ever there. So don't be afraid to play around with this clay. That is just how forgiving it is. When you're happy with how your snowman faces look, it's time to let them dry. I put a fan in front of mine. I close them up in a small room, and it just takes a few hours for them to get good and dry. Once they are dry, I use some generic brand gesso and give them 1 coat of the gesso. This kind of seals the clay, and it gives me a good surface on which to paint the acrylic craft paints. So here I am making my first coat of just inexpensive hobby acrylic paint. I do my snowman white, but you could do ivory, any color you want. This is a super simple paint job. The only thing I find challenging is adding the eyes and the mouth. So I take a little time and practice drawing out those facial details before I actually paint them. So starting with the easy stuff, I'm gonna paint the noses. If you get out of lines a little bit, no problem, just let it dry and take some of the white paint and paint over any mistakes you have. After the noses and cheeks are finished, it's on to the eyes and mouth. I find it's easier to hold the snowman upside down to paint the eyes because sometimes that nose gets in the way of me being able to position the eyes. I use a really fine brush for this, and I also add quite a bit of water to my paint so that I can get as fine a line as possible. You could also use a marker or some sort of paint pen for this part. Just have fun with it. If you are using acrylics and you do make a mistake, I have a super easy fix for you. Just dip a Q-tip in some water and wipe it over the part you want to erase. You might have to do this a couple of times, maybe go over it with the dry side of the Q-tip, but it is a super easy fix as long as you catch it fairly soon in the process. When everything's painted and dry, I give the snowman heads 1 coat of the Mod Podge. I'm using the matte, but you could use whatever finish you want. After that first coat of Mod Podge is dry, I will go over it once more, and I will give everything a little dusting of glitter. So we'll clean up, set these guys aside to dry, and I'll get out my paper and pipe cleaners and we'll make them some party hats. A few videos ago, I made some paper angels using a cone-shaped base for the body. I'm using that same pattern here to cut out some paper for the party hats. This scrapbooking paper is pretty easy to cut with scissors and to get it to fold well. For the smaller size snowman, I did trim off just a little bit on the bottom to make that hat smaller. Also, I score the edge of the shape so that I have kind of a good glue line to use. That's where I know this is going to overlap. Because this paper is really shiny and it doesn't play real well with like a white glue, I'm using hot glue to stick the ends of the hat together. I'll put a link to the pattern for this cone shape in the description box below. To make the little horn shape or party noise maker, I used the same cone, just made a really tiny cone. Here I am using a knitting needle to help me roll such a small little piece. So a lot of this is just trial and error. I'm showing you this just to say, like, you know, have fun with it, get an idea in your mind and just try to make it out of the paper. You'll be surprised at what you can come up with. Have fun experimenting and use all sorts of materials. I had an old shiny pom-pom that I thought made a nice topper for the hat that I have in my hand here. I also discovered a love of hot glue on this project. I hot glued the hats to the snowmen and then I hot glued trim around the base of the hat. I just used shiny pipe cleaners for this. One thing I learned was that it was much easier to glue the trim on if I just used dots of hot glue a couple of inches apart from each other instead of running one long line of glue. But again, take your time, have fun, look for things you have around the house to decorate your snowmen with. I found these gold baking cups in my kitchen when I was hunting for silver and gold things to decorate these guys with, and I thought they were a fabulous addition to this project. I made a little ruff for the smallest snowman, also used this as a hat topper for one of the snowmen and as little confetti coming out of the horn. So don't be afraid to try just oddball things in your project. One thing I forgot to mention is you might notice the little discs of paper that I hot glue the snowman heads to. Those are just the same paper I used for the hats, and then I used a craft punch to make a circle. Now, if you don't have a large craft punch like I did, no problems, just cut out a circle. You can use some pinking shears to make the edge more interesting, or you can just, cut it out with a plain circle. Or find a completely different object to glue the snowman head to. When I came up with the New Year's theme, I briefly thought about putting these heads on the top of a champagne flute for a New Year's table decoration. Again, I encourage you just have fun, experiment, figure out how you want to display these and then make them yours. Y'all, thank you for watching. I've really had fun with this project. I hope you decide to make some of your own. If not, with the New Year's theme, maybe dress them up for Christmas or for January. It's a great kind of after Christmas project. Until next week, you guys, happy crafting. Bye-bye.